Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. The period after the spawn, but before we get into summer, can be a difficult time for a lot of fishermen. Today I have got some tips that are going to help you during the post-spawn. We've already done some videos for you guys about where bass go after they spawn and some in-depth videos about different categories of baits, right? In-depth videos about deep cranking, in-depth video about square bill fishing, in-depth video on worming. But today what I want to do is give you some quick tips, some key baits. Really, we're talking about some baits today, but I'm going to give you my personal favorites for this time of year, because this can be a really challenging time for a lot of anglers, but it doesn't have to be. You can go out and really catch these fish good right now. You can catch a lot of them and you can catch big ones. So I'm going to give you a few categories of baits, explain what they're for and when I throw them, and then give you the very specific details on why those exact baits in those exact situations, so that you can go out there and fish with confidence. After bass spawn, they back out, and the spawn is a funny thing because it happens in waves. So the switch from spawn to post-spawn to summer also happens in waves. There are fish in different parts of that transition. So you can get ahead or behind depending on where you are on your lake. On every lake, you can find groups of fish, some that are farther ahead, some that have backed out to deep water, some that have gone back up shallow, and you can target the group you want to target once you understand why they're there. So again, we've already done in-depth videos on where they go, but just a quick recap. After they spawn, they back out and they sort of recuperate for a couple of weeks. And then one of two things happens. Either that's a fish that prefers deep water and they head off to their offshore outside, maybe out to ledges if you're on a lowland fishery, or out to outside points and humps if you're on a highland reservoir. But there's also a segment of fish that turn around and whoop, go right back up into the shallows. They're up there chasing on the shad spawn. They're up ambushing bluegills. The more cover that your lake has up shallow, the more of the fish that will stay shallow. But even on a lake that has very little cover, there's still a segment of fish that just prefer to be shallow. So you sort of get to pick your poison, if you will, and chase the group of fish that you want. So these first three groups of baits are for fish that go out deep, and then the last two are for fish that stay shallow, okay? So as they go out, you can fish slow or you can fish fast. You can power fish or you can worm. It's totally your prerogative. I do both. If I am slow fishing, I'm literally a one bait wonder. I mean, I don't spend a ton of time slow fishing post spawn. I just don't. I prefer to have my baits moving because I know I can catch fish doing it. But there is something special about a shaky head. It just catches them. As those fish begin to back out to deep water, they tend to stack up on a rocky structure. So outside points, outside humps, saddles going from points out to humps, they'll stack up in those places. If you have current, whether you're a river or you're just a reservoir that has current running through it, wind current or otherwise, fish will get out on the edges of that current on rocky or hard structure as well. But a shaky head can be deadly. And I don't do a lot of experimenting. Occasionally I'll throw a green pumpkin or a Bama bug, but generally speaking, June bug. This is a T-Mac worm. If you watch a lot of our videos, you're not surprised by that. I swear by this worm in June bug. I just crush them on June bug in the post spawn. I don't mix it up. I mean, I know for a fact, if I show up to a lake and they're post spawn and they're outside and I want to go slow, I know for a fact they will eat that worm. They just do. So you can fish it with confidence. If you pull up on a spot and it's not happening, go to a different spot. Don't sit there and beat your head on the wall. Keep moving. But that June bug T-Mac is just a deadly option. And I'll link these specific baits in the video description for you, like we do in every video, to make it as simple as possible. Number two, now we're talking a bait where I'm speeding up. I'm covering water. Again, they're on those rocky structures. I know it. So I'm gonna fish over those things, but I like to cover a lot of water. So I'm gonna do that with a deep crank. What style of deep crank do I throw? Number one is going to be a 6XD. That's just sort of my all-around post-spawn crankbait. It's a good size. It'll get down fairly deep. Most places that I go, it will hit bottom, and they just react to it really well. I like to throw it in a shad type color. I throw a lot of these bolder colors as we go into the spawn, but I also throw a lot of those shad profiles as well. So I do upgrade my hooks. These are Gamakatsu size 2 EWG hooks. If they get a hold of those hooks, they are stuck. And this time of year, there's a lot of fish. There's a lot of schooling fish. Occasionally, you'll hook them 2 at a time. But I just do really well with those EWG style hooks. Sometimes I throw red on the front. If I'm having trouble with them only getting the back hook, I add a red and I can get them to eat both more often than not. But you can also just throw a couple bronze hooks on it and roll. But that 6XD is my number one. Now, if they are deeper, just for whatever reason, your lake, the fish like to position deeper, this is the Azuma Z-Boss 22. That is my go deep bait. I also throw the 24 and the 25, but the 22 is just that magical size. I mean, it will get down and dig clear down around 20 foot on 12-pound fluoro, 15-pound fluoro. I mean, it will get down there on a bomber cast. But I just do exceptionally well with this bait as we head towards summer. And then again, those shad type profiles, and I'll link you a couple of my favorite colors. And then last, this is the Tactical DD. This is Tim and I's crank. Now, we have told you time and time again, we designed this for speed cranking in cold water. But as a happy accident, we discovered post-spawn heading into summer, fish eat it. It's that same thing. We are still speed cranking. Burn, 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 pause. Burn, 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 pause. Fishing on a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1 reel and just hard charging that thing. But it works really, really well. Where I tend to throw this is more of the highland reservoir. So clearer, deeper water. I lean towards our crank, the Tactical DD. More stained water. I'm thinking lowland reservoirs, straight to that 6XD. Okay, just a little bit different profile, and I lean towards them in slightly different situations. And you know your lake. You know which one of those sounds like the best fit for you. Next category is going to be the swim bait. I keep a swim bait really simple. This is a time of year that fish will jack up a 4.8 Kitek. Just straight retrieve, throw it out, let it go to bottom, start winding, or in the morning, or if you've got wind blowing or you've got current and those fish are on the ends of points, you can just throw it out, let it sink a couple of feet and roll it mid-column. I fish it on an exposed head this time of year. This is my head. This is the Matt Allen swimbait head. This is the Tactical head. The difference between them, look at the hook size. It's kind of hard to tell with the swim bait on there. Let me take the swim bait off. Just cost me a Kitek. But hopefully you can see the hook size difference there. See how much bigger this one is? Heavier wire and a wider gap. So this is going to be like lowland reservoir, largemouth. Here, clearer water, spotted bass, smallmouth, smaller largemouth. You know, I can throw this comfortably on 10 and 12 pound line, even in a 3/8 or a ½ ounce. The Matt Allen in a 3/8 or a ½ ounce, I'm throwing that on 12, 15, 17 pound line. Just takes a little more to plant that big hook. But if I know I'm around bigger fish, I want the bigger hook. So that's the trade-off, I think a lot of people don't understand the difference because the heads look so similar. They're identical between a Matt Allen and a Tactical. That is the difference. It's all about that hook and which application you need it for. The last category for out deep, and then we'll go shallow, is one of my favorite things to do this. I say one of, it might be my actual favorite thing to do this time of year. I love throwing wobble heads. A swinging football. So it's a football style head, like a football jig head, but it's got an EWG style hook on it that's free swinging, okay? If you're not familiar with it, it seems crazy. If you've ever done it, you know it is a dream. Man, it's fun. You can put a swim bait on it. A lot of people throw a Kitech on it. I tend to throw craw profiles. Two that are virtually identical, and I crush them on these things. Zoom Z Craw and the X Zone Adrenaline Craw. Very similar profiles, similar actions. The Adrenaline Craw actually has more kick than the Z Craw, but the Z Craw as a whole, if you walk into a local tackle shop, you're more likely to find a Z Craw than an Adrenaline Craw. But again, I'll link both of them for you and the exact colors, but Junebug. Just like my shaky head, Junebug. Now this is the standard Junebug. They also came out with a TW dark Junebug that is money, money. But what I do with these, if you're not familiar with this concept, don't think creature bait, don't think jig, think crankbait. I throw it out, I let it go to bottom. Soon as it hits bottom, I just start reeling. Steady reeling. That's all I do, steady reeling. Once in a while, I'll give it a little pop. But almost all just steady. The key is staying in contact with the bottom. You want that bait bumping through cover. If you've got a lot of grass on the bottom, it will not work. If you've got a lot of sand on the bottom, smooth bottom, it'll work, but it's not magic. But if it's hard bottom, if it's rocky, oh my gosh, that thing is bumping and bouncing and deflecting, and the fish just come from a mile, and they just, boom! I mean, you'll be winding that thing along, just minding your own business, and just, they crush it. It is the most vicious bite, and that's what makes it my favorite thing to do. It's vicious, and it's fun because it's bottom contact, so I'm constantly feeling as I'm bumping over things. So it's not like I'm throwing a Senko, right? You throw a Senko out, you don't feel anything. Oh, there's a fish. Or there's nothing there, reel up, throw it over here. I don't feel anything. Throw it over there, don't feel anything. This is like bump, 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 bump. If I don't feel anything, I free spool because I lifted it up off the bottom by accident. Get it back on the bottom. Bump, 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 pop it over a rock, bump, bump. Boom! Oh my gosh, it's fun. If you have not done it, you need to do it. I throw two hooks, or two sizes. I throw a 1/2 ounce with a 4/0 hook, and then I throw a 3/4 ounce with a 5/0 hook. Really, you could interchange that. You could throw a 5/0 or a 4/0 on either one. But the reason why I do that is a 1/2 ounce with a 4/0, that's like perfect. The 4/0 fits that bait so, in fact, that's a 4/0. So see the length of the hook compared to that body? This is a 5/0. See how it's just a longer hook? It's a little more hook than ideal in shallower water, but a 3/4 ounce head, when you hook a big one, and you will hook a big largemouth doing this, when you hook a giant and she comes up head shaking, 3/4 ounce is trying to rip that hook out of her mouth. So a 1/2 ounce stays in there pretty good. A 3/4 ounce, she has the ability to throw it just because it's more weight pulling on that hook. So I like to upsize the hook a little to that 5/0, and it keeps it pinned in there a little bit better. And I have a great hook up to land ratio. In fact, I can only think of one big one that I've ever jumped off on it, and it was on Chickamauga. Some of you probably remember the footage because my goodness, has Tim never let me live that fish down. Of course, I returned that favor to him too. But I had one come off at the boat that was big, 10, 11 pounds. And And that's one of the only ones that I've ever had spit it like that. In general, it's a great big hook on a big rod, and you just stick them and you have got those fish. You just know when you hit them. Like with a crankbait, you hit them and you're like, please don't come off, please don't, and you're babying them. This is like, smash them, grind them, get them in the boat. You just know when they eat it and you stick them, you know you've got them. Now, one last tip for you. I will take that hook and bend it up ever so slightly, not much at all, just a hair. Makes a huge difference. If that hook point is sitting flush with the bait, I mean, I still hook the vast majority of them, but if it's bent up just a hair, you hook all of them, and it really works well. Now let's talk shallow. Shallow is a whole different animal, and man, it's fun because a lot of fish push up into those shallows. When they're up shallow, my favorite thing to do is throw topwater. Keep it pretty simple too. So we got four things here. If it's up around cover, you know, a lot of our lakes, this time of year, you're starting to have grass that's growing up in the backs of those pockets. So if there's grass, I'm throwing a frog. This time of year, I tend to still stick with a bluegill profile. If not bluegill, I mean, chartreuse is always my baby. So chartreuse or bluegill tends to be where I'm at this time of year. But a smaller profiled frog like that little Kiara there can just absolutely crush them. Again, fishing it right up around cover, and I'm walking it. I'm not just like popping it. We're not talking about fishing on cheese. I'm talking about open water around cover. So walking it just like a topwater, like a spook. Number two is a popper. This is a Megabass Pop X. This is that Megabass Pop Max. See, it's just a size difference deal between them. If I'm having trouble getting bites, I throw the Pop X. If I'm not having any trouble getting bit, I throw the Pop Max because I'm more likely to catch a big one on the bigger popper. But it's also just matching the hatch. If you know everything in there's a little tiny bait fish, throw the little guy. But I love throwing a popper this time of year. Long casts back into shallow pockets. You know, first thing in the morning, a lot of time everything's just slick. It looks like a mirror. Just bomb a popper back there and just bloop. And I'm not working them. You know, some people, like, they rip those poppers. That's not what I'm talking about. Throw it out. I want to show you guys exactly what I'm doing so that you can replicate it. I throw it out there and I just pop, and I just let it sit. Pop, pop, just barely working it. Let it sit. Pop, and they just come suck it off the top. It's not usually a vicious bite. They just slurp it because it's moving so slow. But a lot of times post-spawn, those great big females, they come out and they kind of recover and then they push back in there and they're still a little off, right? They've had a rough spring. The spawn is a hard deal on them. But that slow moving popper over their head, it's more than they can stand. They just come up and they just slurp it off the surface. And then last is a walking bait. The walking bait, if I've got some chop on the water, the walking bait takes over. It can be backs of pockets with chop in them. It can be wind-blown points out on the main lake, but those fish will get up shallow, and that walking bait can catch them. Shad spawn, those fish are up feeding first thing in the morning. That can crush them. Some places shad spawn's already done, but there are still sections of the country where it's still going on strong first thing in the morning, and a walking bait can be a whole lot of fun. And then last but not least is the square bill. Okay, when these fish are up first thing in the morning, and it's not just first thing in the morning, like on Clear Lake, out in California, Clear Lake's full of big fish. They're all the way into summer. There are fish that just like to get right up shallow on that hard cover, and I can just cream them, burning, and I mean burning a square bill just as fast as I can go. And then it's not like our tactical crank where it's like burn, burn, run, pause, burn, burn, run, pause. I don't pause that much, maybe every 10 or 15 feet. So I burn as fast as I can for 10 or 15 feet and then throw a pause and then burn again and then throw a pause in there. But on that pause, they just load up on it. They just get it. This is my main bait, River to Sea Biggie. This is the gizzard shad color. Any of the chrome type colors. This time of year, if I'm throwing a square bill, I want a lot of flash. Now, if the water's really muddy where you live, then maybe switch over to either white or chartreuse. But generally speaking, if there's any visibility in that water at all, I'm throwing those chrome type shad colors. But it's a loud bait. I can cover a ton of water in that 3 to 5 foot zone, and it just catches them. A budget option for you. This is the Spro Essential series, and this little guy is really inexpensive. Comes with good hooks, has a great rattle. That chrome black color is just a killer in that exact same profile and depth range. So a very inexpensive option for the guy who just wants to try it out. That one is my favorite, and that's a great budget option. Again, guys, no particular order, but these are the things I am throwing this time of year. I'm out there chasing largemouth around, fishing highland reservoirs, fishing lowland reservoirs, fishing rivers. These fish are aggressive, but they've broken into 2 distinct groups. And if you don't understand that, you can pull up shallow and catch one, then you go out deep and catch one, then you get on a ledge and catch one. You're like, what's the deal? They're everywhere, but I'm not building a pattern. It's because they're distinct groups that have split. If you understand that, it makes a lot more sense. And these are the exact baits that I go out and throw with confidence this time of year, and you can too. Again, I'll link them all in the description with my favorite sizes, colors, all that stuff, so you know exactly what we're using. Hopefully it'll help you as well. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.